Hello, welcome back to my Factorio tutorial series. In this episode, I'm going to be going over uh, belts, the different belts. There's three kinds, and I'm going to talk about um, what they do, how to use them, maybe some ways that are a little bit more complex that you might not know about. Basically, just everything there is that you need to know about belts. So first off, I'm going to mention I'm using two mods in this world. First one is creative mode, which is this. Basically, it just gives me infinite inventory so I can build whatever I want. Um, I can automatically get rid of things, stuff like that. It's just to make it uh, a lot easier for me to show you what's going on. And then the second mod I'm using is called Spawn Belt. It adds this item to the game, Spawn Belt, and this item, Void Belt. Basically, those are just so, like, I'll show you what happens. If you place one down, it just creates a lot of items, and that's if I'm like trying to show you a design of something and I don't want to have to build uh, a million outposts, right, to get a whole bunch of iron ore going. All I need to do is, build one spawn belt and it'll make all the iron ore I need, right? And the same thing goes for the void belt. It just does the opposite, where if I connect a whole bunch of belts to it and then I fill the belt with some items, then once they get all the way to the end to this void belt, they disappear, right? So that's so that I don't have the production lines stacking up. And I'll go in more into depth on spawn belt and creative mode, the mods, in a later episode. But yeah, those are just a couple of useful mods to have in a test world like this, where basically I'm not trying to beat the game. I'm just trying to show you some mechanics of the game. So let's hop right into it. The first kind of belt is yellow belt, and it's just called transport belt. And it's the slowest, as well as the least expensive to build. It only takes 3 iron ore raw, an iron plate, an iron gear wheel, right? It's the least expensive. You start out knowing how to build this, and it's got the least throughput, which is a word that we'll use a lot in Factorio, and it seems really confusing at first. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure that I understand it fully, but I'm pretty sure I get the basic idea. This belt, each belt is the same length. So this is the second kind of belt. It's a red belt. Fast transport belt is what it's technically called. And then this third kind of belt is an express transport belt, also referred to as blue belt, right? Because it's blue. So there's yellow belt, red belt, and blue belt. Blue belt is the most expensive. You won't get to it until late game, and you can beat the game without ever needing blue belt. But if you build a big enough factory, then it might necessitate the use of blue belt because it's got a higher throughput. So for instance, let me teach you a little bit about throughput. If I put out some spawn belts and I fill these belts with ore, then you can see that each one of these, let me break these off, each one of these holds the exact same amount of ore because it's just one tile of belt, right? So regardless of the color, they can all hold only 8 on a tile, right? But the difference in belt comes in when you, let me just clear these off real quick. The difference comes in when you need to move stuff a long distance. So let's go like this far. If I have a whole bunch of, let's say, furnaces over here, or on both sides of any of these belts, right? Then if I have the slow belt, then a fast inserter is going to pull items off of it quickly, and the items aren't going to make it all the way to the end because these inserters are going to take them off before they can get there because of how slow the belt is. It may have the exact same amount of items on it as these other belts, but because it's moving slower, it's going to be taken off before it can get to the end. So maybe all your furnaces won't work because all your iron ore is being taken off before it gets to the last couple furnaces, right? Um, so throughput, that's what throughput is. It's how many items per second uh, can move on that belt, right? So other things have throughput, not just belts. Like bots have throughput, but that's a little harder to calculate. Pipes have throughput. It's just how much of something can get through a section in 1 second, let's say, or a certain amount of time. And with these belts, these yellow belts have a throughput of 100, not 100, 13.333, so 13 and a third items per second if you use both lanes. But because belts have 2 lanes, you can only use one if you'd like, and you just half the items per second. So if you use 1 lane, it's 6 and 2/3. If you use 2, it's 13 and 1/3. Red belt is exactly twice as fast as yellow belt. It can move 26 and 2/3 items per second on both lanes, or 13 and a third on 1 lane. And blue belt is exactly 3 times as fast as a yellow belt, and it can move 40 items per second on both lanes, or 20 on one. So let me kind of show you how these belts work. You probably know already that I'm going to hold an item, and if I press Z, it'll place it on the belt. Belts move things, okay? So it can move the player, it can move items, and I'm pretty sure belts can even move biters. So if you had like a wall set up with belts going away from the wall, then it can push the biters back so they don't start damaging your walls, right? I've seen a couple of builds like that. So with these belts, one thing that you may not know about is a trick called side loading. So what that is if you just line up a belt like this and you fill this side with items, then it's going to go on both lanes, right? And the way this spawn belt works is if I put a chest behind it and I put something in the chest, then when so let me get rid of this real quick. If I put something, if I put the belt in front of the chest, then it's gonna start outputting whatever items in the chest. Which in this case, I just put chests in the chest. So this will help you see that if I put another belt over here and a yellow belt, then this belt in the middle, let me clear these off real quick. If I put 2 belts, one on each side, then instead of curving like this, the belt in the middle goes straight. Which means that if I put some items coming in this way, oops. If I put some items coming in this way, they only go on this left lane of the belt. You can see that this right lane is empty. And then if I have some other item coming in this way, then what we get is 2 different items on the same belt, one in each lane, right? So belts have 2 lanes, and there's a couple different ways of side loading like that, of getting items on just 1 lane. What you can do is if we have a, let's get one of these creative provider chests, which just has every item in the game in it. And then let's get an inserter, and then let's pull this straight, and let's get an active energy source, so that just provides infinite power. And then let's use some electric poles. This will start putting things out of the chest, and it puts it on the far lane. So this works with not just chests, it works with assembling machines. Inserters just put whatever they're grabbing, furnaces even, whatever they're grabbing out of, it puts it on the far lane. So you can see that this left-hand lane is empty, but the right-hand lane has all this power armor in it, because I guess that's what the inserter is pulling out. So that's another way of filling just one. I'm going to use this void storage chest, which just allows me to get rid of items I don't want. That's another way to just load one side of a lane, one lane of a belt, I mean. Another way is if you use underground belt, and let's say we have an underground belt going this way, and let's have it come out like this. Then if I have some items coming down and just running right into this belt, and I put some items on it like this, then the lane that is near the open end of the belt, of the underground belt, will put its items onto the top lane of the belt, right? So if I had something on the bottom like this, then these right hand side is going to hit this underground belt, and it's going to put it on the bottom lane, the lane closest to the belt that it's hitting. So this is a way of side loading that you can use. So if we had stuff coming down this belt on one lane, but we wanted to put it on another lane, put something else on the other lane, then we just have it hit the underground belt like this. This is a nice, easy way of doing that. Another way, let's see. Yeah, so I think those are the most basic ways of side loading. You can, instead of just doing like this to side load, you could have just a lane going like this and bring a lane just perpendicular to it, like that. And then what it's going to do is all these items are just going to go on this side. That's another way of side loading. Another thing I should probably mention is that inserters pull from the far lane first. So this inserter, because there's nothing on the far lane, will pull from the near lane. Let's hook it up to a void chest so it gets rid of everything. So it's pulling off of the close lane because there's nothing on the far lane. But if we put things on the far lane, then it looks like I was wrong. So I thought that if you put the inserters pulled from the far lane, but I guess they only put onto the far lane, and they can pull from wherever. That's good to know. Also, another thing that you can do with belts, there's 3 different types of belt, right? Red, blue, and yellow, but each different color has 3 versions of that belt. So for normal transport belts, yellow belts, you've got transport belt, you have underground belt, which allows you to build belt over it, right? Or anything in this area. And if we fill this with items and we fill this one with items, then these items aren't going to be placed on this belt. Okay, so that's so that you can move things more efficiently. Another of the different kinds of belt is a splitter. And splitters were really confusing to me at first, but they make a lot of sense if you just think about them. So let's do this. Splitters have 2 outputs. It takes one line coming in or 2 lines, and it splits the incoming cargo, whatever's on the belt. It puts half of it on the left and half of it on the right. On the right tile, not the lane. It stays in its specific lane. So if we have this spawn belt coming like this, so only the left side is getting only the left lane of this belt is getting items on it, then only the left lane of these will get items on them, and it will stop. It won't fill the right lane, right? So that's useful to know if you have 2 different items on the same belt. But if we have both sides going, then this will move. Every other iron ore will go on this left side, and the other one will go on this right side until they both fill up, right? So that's what a splitter does, and splitters can get really complicated if you start to do some math. Like, so for instance, let's say we have 4, let's say that we have one uh, lane of iron ore coming, right? So, but we need 2 lanes because we have got 2 furnace setups or something, right? Um, then we can split it, and it will take half of everything on this belt and put it on the right belt, and it'll take half and put it on the left belt. So if we straighten these out, then we can see these are perfect, count perfect balancing. So this one belt gets split evenly amongst 2 belts. And then if you want to get more complicated, you can go into like 1 to 3 belt balancer that will put a third on each of these belts. You can do, I've seen up to like 16 lane belt balancers, and those are huge and crazy. Which brings us to another idea, which is called belt balancing, where let's say we've got 4 lines of iron ore going or whatever, right? And then we split off of this one, right? And we bring it over here because we want to use it in our factory. And this is our main bus. Let's say we've got a 4-lane main bus. But now, after this splitter, let's say each of these has 100% of 100% throughput. Okay, so let's say they're all fully saturated, like this. But then after this splitter, you can see this only has half as much as these, right? So these still have 100% throughput, but this one only has 50 because we split the other 50 onto this other belt. So now, if we need to pull off this belt again, we're going to get half as much iron ore on this second line throughput. So now, instead of having 50% of the throughput like this one does, this one's only got 25% of the throughput because we take 100 divided by 2 because of this splitter, so 50 and 50, and then divide 50 by 2 on this splitter, so 25 and 25. But these all still have 100 because they haven't been split. So to fix this problem, we use what's called a belt balancer. So let's get rid of that, and let's build a simple 4-lane belt balancer, which will take. It doesn't actually do the math. It just moves items. But if it were like a function of math, then what it does is it takes this percentage, which is 50, and then it adds this percentage, which is 100. It adds the 4 percentages together, so 100 plus 100 plus 100 plus 50, which gives you 350, right? And then it divides it by 4, and it balances these 4 lanes percentages. So if we do that math really quick, then we can find that 350 divided by 4, each one of these lanes after we put the belt balancer in is going to have 87.5% of the throughput, which for the 3 lanes that have 100, they all lost 12.5%, but the one that had 50 just gained 37.5%. Right, which is 12.5 times 3. It gained the 12.5% that each of these lost. So now they're all balanced, and this one has a higher throughput than it would if we just left it like this. So I'll show you the design for that. First you cut off the whole line, and then you put a splitter on the far 2 and a splitter on the other 2. So now you've got 2 splitters which balances those lines, and then you take out these 2 pieces and you drop it down, and you need 1, 2, 3 in between, and then you bring it back up. So you have underground belts like this. And then at the end you put 2 more splitters, which I've heard you don't actually need those 2 splitters unless your belts are going to go for a long time. You can manage without these 2 splitters, but I always put them in there because it's not much more expensive, and it's like a little bit better. And then on these, in the middle of these 3 belts, you want to clear that out, put a splitter, and then you get rid of the belts next to it. You turn this one in and this one in, and then these ones out, and now you have a 4-lane belt balancer. So 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, and then 50, 100, 100, 100, and then it goes through here, and you've got 87.5 on all four. That's what belt balancing is. It's taking the throughput percentages and making them equal, even though you can't bring them all back to 100, right? You just take what you have and divide it amongst the four. That's what this belt balancer does, and these can be very useful in your factories. So that's what a belt balancer is. That's a simple 4-lane belt balancer. Let's see, what else is there to know about these belts? Let's talk about the recipes. So for yellow transport belts, each one of these, if you handcraft them, I guess only on the yellow belts, and technically you can't handcraft express, underground, or transport belts or splitters. You can't handcraft these, but I can because of my creative mode mod. But in the normal game, you can't handcraft these because they require lubricant, which you can't hold, right? You can't hold lubricant. You have to put it into an assembling machine. So let's show you. So if we put this yellow on here, then it takes an iron plate and a gear wheel, and it gives you 2 transport belts. If we change the recipe to red, it takes a gear wheel and a yellow belt, and it will give you 1 red belt. If we change it to blue, you can see it takes a gear wheel, red belt, and some lubricant, which is actually, it takes 2 lubricant, and it makes 1 blue belt, right? And if you look at this, if we have the Alt, if you press Alt, it will show you more information. So we have Alt on right now. This blue arrow is saying, hey, if you press R, you can rotate it. Hey, we need to bring lubricant into the machine right here. And you would do that using either underground pipes connected to some lubricant or just normal pipes, right? So you probably won't, in your first factory, you probably won't get to the point of needing express transport belts, but you may if you find yourself building really long like electronic circuit setups or red circuit setups. Any of those things may require you to upgrade to blue belt. But blue belt is really expensive, and I didn't use it in my first map. I barely even used red belt, because for most things, yellow belt is enough. Because people like to upgrade to these other belts because, look, they go faster, right? Like, it would be so much better to get my stuff where it's going faster, wouldn't it? But really, you don't need that in a lot of cases, because this has a pretty high throughput as it is. And you only really need 40 items per second in like pretty big builds, which for most people you won't ever have. So, or you won't have in your first factory until you start to get addicted and build mega bases and things. Let's see. The other cool thing I was going to tell you about underground belts. This is a sweet thing to know. Let's do one of these. Let's put a chest here, and let's fill it with, let's grab some steel. And let's put some steel in here, because I'm going to use a spawn belt, and I'm going to have steel coming out of this chest, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some underground belt. These can go up to that far away. You can have 4 in between. And if you build it 2 away or 3 away, so there's 2 in between, it still uses 5 transport belts to make one of these. So to get the most efficient use out of these, you want to make them as long as you can. That way, the 5 transport belts that you used to create this don't get wasted because you made it shorter. But that's just if you want to be completely efficient. So I'm going to make this as long as I can, and I'm going to dip it a couple times, and then have it come out there. And then the cool thing that you can do because there are, let's have it come out one further. Because there are 3 different colors, a cool thing that you can do that you may not know is, let's fill this one with storage tanks. Why not? And then I'm going to have another spawn belt coming out, bringing out these storage tanks, right? And what this does is, if I have a fast underground belt, I can bring it underneath these yellow underground belts, and at the end here, these 2 belts don't cross. So I can have a red belt coming through as well as a yellow belt coming through, and these, if you look, these are all just storage tanks. No matter how much I grab, you know, still just storage tanks. I'm pressing F to grab stuff off the ground. These are steel plates. No matter how much I grab, they'll always be steel plates, even though we've got storage tanks on the same line. Because they're different colors, you can do this, which is pretty cool, I think. And it works with all 3. I can't really. Okay, so this is what we'll do. We'll side load. Yeah. So let's try it like this. Let's get rid of all of these. Let's build this as far as we can a couple times. I'm trying to find a way to make. Oh, maybe this will work. Yeah. So if we bring this red one down here, and then we bring a blue one right here, then you can see that this is getting pretty complicated. And then let's put some items on these. Let's have the blue belt like this. Let's have the red belt like this. And let's have the yellow belt like this. And then let's put some chests right here, because I'm going to use some spawn belts again. I'm going to put these items in here, and let's fill this one with these fast inserters. And then I'm going to put these spawn belts on, and they start with iron until it realizes what's in the chest. And then even though we've got all these belts like on top of each other, the way we've set it up is that because they're all the same color, if we come down here, you'll notice that these are still only storage tanks. And if we come down here, these are just steel plates. And if we bring this one down, these are just inserters. And so this is one way to get, because they're different colors, this works. But if you tried to do this with all the same color, it wouldn't work. So let me show you. If you have, let's say, something like this, where you have just iron ore going through, and you have a line coming off like this. Then if you had another belt coming out this way, then what it's going to do is your underground belt that goes down into the ground only looks for the first output. So if I take off these iron ores, you're going to see that this is empty now, because this one is stealing all of the output, because they're the same color. But since these are all different colors, you can do this sweet little setup where the same item just goes through the blue belts, or the red belts, or the yellow belts. And that's really good to know. That's super space efficient. You get 3 belts worth of items in 1 belt's worth of space, right? Because it's 1 tile wide, which is really cool. So let's get rid of all this. And then I think, let's see, is there anything else to teach you about these belts? So, okay, here's one thing that you should know. If we've got an express transport belt that's fully compressed, okay? So here's technically 40 iron per second, 40 iron ore per second can go on this belt. But then we don't have any blue splitters, so we're going to split it with a red splitter. And then we bring blue belt down this way, and we bring blue belt down this way. then because this is a red splitter, it can only split so fast. It can only split at the speed of a red belt, which means that if I stand here, you can see that the throughput of this blue belt isn't 40 per second anymore. It's however fast a red belt is, which I think is 26 and a third, but I don't remember. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is even though all of this is blue belt, except for this red splitter, the splitter is slowing down the throughput of this blue belt to whatever red is. And the same thing goes on this arm. And if we do the opposite, so that's one way of mixing belts that is a problem that will hinder you. Another way is if you have, let's say, some red belt, but then you ran out of red belt, so you used some yellow belt, but then you got more red belt, so you used more red belt. So you've got red, yellow, red, right? If we fill this, then we can see this is fully saturated. It's still fully saturated, but then when it comes out here, it's half saturated. So if I stand down here, you can see because the yellow belt has a slower throughput than the red belt, even though it's saturated, not as many items can go through here. It's going to be half saturated. Saturated just means there's no room for you to put anything on the belt because it's completely full. So that's one thing to avoid as well, is using a slower belt on a faster belt's line. What you can do is, if we have this fully saturated yellow belt and we put some red belt in the middle and then we put some yellow belt on the end, then this yellow belt is still going to be fully compressed, even though it's half compressed on this red area. So I stand right here and I take away these. You can see this red belt is half compressed, but these yellow belts are still fully compressed because it's coming from a fully compressed yellow belt originally. So that can help you speed stuff through your factory. Is maybe you've got 4 lanes. Wow, that's way more than 4. Maybe you've got 4 lanes of yellow belt going. You want to speed them through this area quicker, so you've put red belt, and you don't need to take anything off of these, so it's okay that it's half throughput, because when you get back to this yellow belt, it'll be full throughput again, and we can see that like this. So that's one way of using different colored belts to your advantage. And the other thing to keep in mind about belts is with this FPS UPS number, let's say I've got a blue belt, 2 blue belts, one's underground and one is overground, right? Or just on ground, I guess. And they both have the same number of items on them because they're the same length, right? But if you look closely, then let's get rid of these. If you look closely, then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles. Each has 8, so you've got 32 iron ore that you can see on this top belt. But on this bottom belt, because it's underground, you can only see these 2 as well as these 2, which means even though there's 32 iron ore here, we can only see 4, which is an eighth of what you can see here. So if you're building a really big base, the game has to render all of these items to show the player every update. So if you have a really big base, then and you have a lot of these belts, then you have a lot of items sitting on the ground being rendered, where you could have these underground belts and have them not rendered but have the same throughput. So technically, underground belt is more UPS friendly than normal belt because you don't have to render as many items. But that as well usually won't be a problem for most players until you start building really big bases, or if you're on a lower end machine that is maybe not so good at, doesn't have such a good processor or something, then it might be important to use this idea where these underground belts are more UPS friendly than these overground belts or just normal transport belts. Also, if you have a belt like this that's fully extended and it's full of items, and as soon as you pick up one of these two, you'll grab every single item that's on every one of those tiles in between, as well as the tile you pick up. So this underground belt right here only has the 8 iron ore on it that are on its tile, but when I pick it up, if you look, it says plus 40 iron ore because it picked up all of the tiles in between. So now there's only 8 iron ore on this line. You pick this up, or I guess it says 4. You only get 4. That's one thing to know. If your inventory is like full, like mine, then it's important to know that you're going to pick up a whole bunch of items if you pick up one of the 2 of your underground belts. I think that that's everything. If I've missed anything or I've said something that you think is inaccurate, feel free to let me know in the comments section down below. If you'd like to see more tutorial videos like this, in the future I'll be covering things like ratios. I may go more into depth about throughput, and talk about how pipes and bots increase throughput. I can talk about oil. I'll talk about trains. I'll talk about logistics robots. I'll talk about combinators. There's a lot of stuff in this game, and I'm willing to talk about all of it. So if you'd like to see more videos like that, please subscribe, leave a like. But until next time, thanks for watching.